Hi there, my name is Miss Townsend and I love math. Welcome to Math with Townsend. This video is for data management students. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Fathom in order to do some of the basic statistics and graphing that you need for your culminating project. It's definitely not a complete tutorial on how to use Fathom because there's some amazing stuff that the software can do, but this is just more of a really quick introduction on using the statistical side of it purely to do some stats work. So first, let's look at Fathom itself. So this is what Fathom looks like when you don't have any data in it. So it's basically just a blank screen. Now what's important is that everything that we're going to be using is sort of available to us, oops, right here. So this is really where we're going to live, in this corner up here. We will be using the collection box, the table, ooh, the graph, and the summary. All of the other icons you see are for some of the other interesting things that Fathom can do, but are beyond the scope of this video and are not relevant for your culminating project. So we will be using these four icons here, and then above them we'll also obviously be using, oh, my bad. We'll be using the menu bar above them occasionally with the words file, edit, object, and so on. Okay, so first of all, obviously, we need to get some data here. So let's look at Excel. So presumably, this is what your Excel file looks like at this point. You have selected the two attributes that you're studying. So you should have, at this point, edited the Excel file down to just three columns. A column for the country name, a column for attribute 1, and a column for attribute 2. So I'm going to be using a different set of data just so that I'm not, giving anyone a heads up if I happen to pick the same attributes as your project. So what I want to do is I basically want to take all of this data, still in this form exactly, and move it into Fathom. So the easiest way to do that is I'm going to highlight the three columns that I want. So those are the columns I want, and literally all I did was click and drag. That stuff's good. And then I'm going to copy. So I'm using Control C, and then I'm going over to Fathom. And so this is, here we go. So the first thing I do is I pull down an empty collection. So you'll notice it's a box and there's nothing in it. That's an empty collection. And now what I want to do is I want to put something in the box. And what I want to put in the box is what I've copied from Excel. So the next thing is I'm going to, and be careful here, while the box is highlighted, not unhighlighted, while the box is highlighted, I'm going to paste. And again, you can do that with Control V or you can right click paste. So you'll notice that there's now something in the box. So what happens is if I pull this like this, I'm now able to see each of the individual things that I put in the box. So there's a piece of data that represents Atlanta, a piece of data that represents Boston, and so on. But I don't really need to see that. It's just nice to know that something is in the box. The other thing I can do is I can double click on the word collection 1 and I can change that to something relevant if I want. So for example, I can call this NBA ticket prices or whatever, called statistics. Okay, so there it is. That's my data, and now my data file's here. So at this point, I would probably save this and save it as, this is my data file or whatever. So I'm going to save this as NBA stuff. Sure. Okay, and so it's .ftm, so obviously save it somewhere where you'll find it. So there it is. Now I have my statistics. So here's what I want to do. First of all, I want to look at my statistics. This, again, it's not that great to look at, right? I don't really know what's going on there. So instead, what I do is, with the box highlighted, so again, highlighted, not highlighted, I want it highlighted. The next thing I do is I pull down a table. And what happens is, because the box is highlighted, that table automatically fills up with the information that's in my collection. So here's my data, and you can resize this so you can see it, or you can make it small, whatever. Let's leave it so we can see everything. So there's my data. And again, it's basically all it is exactly what I had in Excel, but now it's in Fathom, and that's where I wanted it to be. So let's talk about how to make a couple quick graphs. So first of all, I'm going to come here and I'm going to drag an empty graph. So there's my graph. It's empty. So let's say I want to look at attendance. So what I want to do is I want to pick up the word attendance and drop it onto the graph. So when I say pick up, what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the word attendance and I'm holding the mouse key down. And then I'm moving over, and you can see the little hand. It's like it's holding something. It's pretty cute. And here are my options. I can drop it here or down here. Now, if I drop it here, it's sort of weird. So I'm going to pick it up again and drop it down here. That's where I really wanted it. Now, the default is a dot plot. I don't like that. We don't know what that is. I don't want to see that on your project. But I can make a histogram. So there's a histogram of my data. And boy, that was a lot faster than the histograms that we were making in Excel. So there's my histogram. Now, there's obviously some problems with it. So let's talk about how to make this the best histogram it can be. So first of all, you'll notice I just made it bigger. That's just so we can see it. Let's say, for example, that you didn't like, you can take your hand tool, and I'm clicking and dragging. Oops, sorry. You can click and drag the axis to sort of, you know, show more or less, although the computer program is really good about picking a nice scale for you. Um, so you see how the sideways hand means click and drag and extend it or expand it. If I actually click on the axis itself, I'm like sliding it over, but none of those are really, why would you do that? I don't know. Same thing here, I can click and drag the axis. I'm not sure why I would, but you can play around with it. Okay, so you can also double click on the axis and be a little more specific. And this is good because I never want you to hand in to me a graph that a computer made that is not something you would have made by hand. In other words, make sure that you can make the computer do your bidding. You are the master. This is the pre-Skynet world. So bin alignment. So let's talk about bin width. We know what bin width is from the course of study. Bin width is how wide each of those bars is. So right now the default, for some reason, it's on 1,000. Let's say I made the bin width 500. So boom, there's the bin width of 500. And you can see now, there's more bars because I made it 500. Bin alignment is where the first bin starts. So this one starts at 11,500, which is fine. Basically, you want to make sure that your bin alignment makes sense according to your bin width. In other words, if my bin width is 500, I'm not going to align that with 1170. Like that's just bizarre, right? Like you're going to try to pick something so that if you look down here, we need to pick something that just makes sense. So where it was fine. I have no idea where it was anymore. Let's try that. There we go. So in other words, I like my bin width to be a perfect divisor of my bin alignment. X lower and X upper, that's telling me the smallest number I can see down here and the biggest number I can see up here. So you can see that as I drag that axis, X upper is going to change, and then Y lower, the y-axis, same thing. You can either type it in or drag it. Reversing, so reversing is, the default is to have the smallest numbers on the left and then increasing to the right. Same with the y-axis, smallest numbers here and increasing up. But for some reason, if you wanted to reverse that, you could type true and now it's backwards. However, I can't imagine why you would for this project. So there we go. Here's my histogram. So the most important thing, obviously, is to make sure that that histogram is something that you know that I'm looking for. Be careful not to, play around too much without saving. And you'll notice another option for bin width, by the way, is to actually, if you move your cursor right onto one of the bar edges, you can actually directly manipulate the bin width like this. But, then you get weird and ridiculous bin widths that are not going to get you as good marks as beautiful and lovely bin widths like this one. So let's fix, 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 fix. And we'll make this alignment at there. And then we will drag this down. So there's a histogram that's not so bad. Okay, so there's my histogram. And we'll talk in a bit about, oh, no, if I want this in my project, I'm still not going to get great marks for it because there's no title. Um, I just want the word frequency here. You know that. I don't want it to say frequency of because you have a title. It should say attendance, frequency of attendance, and this should be a little more specific, like attendance during the 1989-1990 NBA season. Well, that would be mine. So what I usually do, and maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, is I usually will do a copy on that picture, and then I'll paste it. For me, I use Microsoft Paint because it's so simple. I'll just copy and paste that in Microsoft Paint and make it look exactly like I want it to look because I'm the statistician. So if anybody wants me to like do a little video on using Microsoft Paint, I can do that too. But presumably you guys maybe even are better at Photoshop type stuff than I am. Anyway, there's my histogram. So hopefully you see how to make a histogram, and I'll do it again. This time I'll do it with price just to make sure. So I drag an empty graph. I'm going to pick up by clicking and holding the word price, and you can see the little hand, now it's full. And I'm going to drop it down here. And then I select histogram from my options, and there's the default histogram. And the default histogram is usually pretty good, although I always like to see what my bin widths are and my bin alignments. Like a bin alignment of 10.5, I don't know. I don't know. I don't like that, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's good statistics reasons for doing it, but at this point in your statistical career, don't do that. Just make it a nice bin width. Okay, so there's another example. Now, we also have graphs that I want you to make called box and whisker. So, um, oh wait, this is not an acceptable box and whisker plot. Good, you know that. Of course you know that. But in Fathom, remember how I had that option to make a histogram? Well, down here is an option to make a box plot. When I press click, it's a perfect box and whisker plot. Like I literally, other than a title and a slightly better little title down here that again I would do in Microsoft Paint, um, that's perfect. I mean, maybe I'll center it a little more, you know, make it the star of the picture, but that is a box plot. So again, I'll show you again. I grab an empty graph, and then I'm going to go and pick up the word attendance by clicking and holding, dropping it here, boom. And then here, if I click box plot, and what I like is that you can see the outliers immediately as well. There are my outliers. So it's a good piece of statistical software. Now, what's obviously interesting is what are those outliers? So if I click on that outlier, it actually, if you notice, let me do it again. So I'm going to click on a dot, but focus your attention over here. When I click on a dot, it shows me which piece of which datum that is. That's the Charlotte team. And this is Minnesota. Okay? So, and part of a good statistical study is going to talk about outliers, and there are your outliers really quickly. So that's great. Now, if you wanted to remove your outliers to do a mean calculation, for example, then you know which ones to remove, and you don't have to do the outlier boundary test. You can just use your box and whisker and trust it because it's right. And again, take your box and whisker, you can copy and paste it just like a picture and manipulate the titles and stuff so it looks good. Okay, so hopefully that's a good background on how to use this to make histograms and box and whisker. Um, we also have to be able to make scatter plots. So a scatter plot is when we compare the two attributes of your project to see if there's a correlation. So it's kind of, hopefully at this point, drag a graph. Your independent variable will go at the bottom. So I'm going to think that maybe, so my research question would be, does the price of a ticket influence the attendance for NBA teams? So therefore, the price for me is my independent variable. It goes there. And then I'm going to pick up and drop attendance here. And there's my scatter plot. Like, done. And again, you can manipulate the axes just like before with other graphs and so on. There's my scatter plot. Perfect. Perfect scatter plot. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. You can double click on a dot. If you double click on it, it can let you do things to the dots like change how big they are, which, woo, that's pretty big. Stuff like that. Whatever. Play around with it. The basics are there. So there's my scatter plot. Now we know that what we want to do with a scatter plot look for the correlation. So what I want you to notice for a minute is focus your attention here on the menu options. Right now I see File, Edit, Object, Collection, Window, Help. When I click on the graph, I get a new menu option called Graph. And when I click on it, this will allows me down here to draw a least squares line. So you may remember that when you use technology, you want always to make a least squared line. Okay, hold on. So, yes. So if I put a least squares line, it automatically draws that line of best fit. And down here, really tiny, but really important, it shows me the equation. Attendance equals 8.47 price plus 15,600, and it gives me the correlation of coefficient. R squared is 0.00084. Huh. So basically there is no correlation between the price of an MBA ticket and the attendance, as expected, but that's okay. Um, so hold on, I just want to see if my pen will work for me. Boop, boop, boop. No. Okay, that's fine. We'll take this and we'll borrow it. And so you don't have to do the calculations. If you don't like what you learned about Excel, if you find Excel clunky for something like this, it's right there for you. You'll notice, by the way, that graphing would also make a median line. Please don't do that. A median line is the best line you can do by hand without technology. But there's no point in making a median line if we're in front of technology. So let me just, I'm going to take this for a minute to this graph or to this page just to, it's a little slow. Nope, it's not what I wanted. So if I do Control C and then Control V, zut alors. All right, so it works in Microsoft Word, but it doesn't work with the program I'm using to record my video, so that's my bad. So let's go to Microsoft Word. And I just want to make sure that you clearly understand the information that this least squared line is giving me. So I should have set this up in advance. Okay. It's still not working. Hold on. Okay, so there's my graph. Oh, I think you have to go to edit copy as picture. So I was doing Control C and it wasn't working and it was frustrating me. So we're learning together. You have to go to edit copy as picture, not just Control C. But there, I did it. So maybe now this will work. Now I'm going to paste. Whoa, it worked. Oh, isn't that nice? So here is that same graph. And I brought it here just because this is where I can use my tablet pen to actually discuss something. So I want to really make sure that this is clear what's going on here because I certainly do not expect or hope that no one just shows me this in their project, right? Your job is to explain the statistics to me. So first of all, if we go back to grade 9 for a second, basically what this is saying is that the equation of that line of best fit is y equals 8.47 times x plus 15550. So it is a line the same way that a line was in grade 9. It's just instead of y, it's attendance, and instead of x, it's ticket price. Now, obviously, this is not really a great equation because the correlation of coefficient is so ridiculously close to zero that we can statistically say that there is no correlation between ticket price and attendance at NBA games in the 1989-1990 season. Oh, what am I doing here? But I just want to make sure that it looks like a bunch of weird, like with all these weird extra lines and stuff. But in fact, that's all it's saying. It's telling me the slope and the y-intercept. And then there's that r squared value, which you need to talk about how strong that relationship is. Okay, so let's go back to Fathom. Good. So we talked about histograms, we talked about box and whisker, we talked about scatter plots. Awesome sauce. So let's talk about how you can actually use Fathom to actually do your just calculations as well. And that's where we're going to pull down the fourth thing that we're interested in, which is called summary. It's actually a summary table. And it's sort of weird, but it's weird visually, but it's really nice to use. Let's say that I wanted to know a bunch of statistical things about attendance. So now there's three options. I can drop it on this arrow, Okay, I can drop it on this arrow. Okay, or I can drop it on this box. So, I mean, whatever. It just all happened. I don't really, because obviously no one's gonna copy paste this. You're just using this to calculate the number you type in and make it look nice. But so let's just do whichever one. It totally doesn't matter. Gone. Bye bye. Okay, so we now know that the mean attendance was 15,710. So what's weird is that down here is where it tells you it's the mean. So I can click on it and it'll highlight it. But I hope that the new company that owns Fathom will kind of maybe fix that. So what else can we find? Well, just like before, if you'll notice again the menu options, file, edit, object, collection, window, help. When I click on the summary table, I get a menu option called summary. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to click on Add Basic Statistics. And what happens is I now have mean, count, which is the number of pieces of data, standard deviation, oh, that's a good one to know, standard error, we don't need to know that, count missing. Hopefully you've already removed all the missing data. So for countries where you don't have the data, hopefully you've already removed them from your study and made comment about that in your introduction. So here, I mean, the only one I really needed there was standard deviation, but there we go. If I go to summary again, I can add a 5-number summary. And now I have minimum, Q1, median, Q3, and max. So that's kind of nice. If you want other things, go up to summary, add formula. You can type in a formula. Um, or if you click on the little plus sign beside functions, I'll make this a little bigger. So if you click on functions, there's arithmetical, conditional, distributions, logical. The one we want is statistical functions. And we want one attribute. And these are all of the things, the one attribute statistics that can be calculated by Fathom automatically. Count first, interquartile range last, max, mean, median, min, percentile, population standard deviation, population variance, product, da 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 da. Please don't discuss any statistics that we haven't discussed as a class. And definitely don't tell me any statistics that you don't really clearly understand. So think about all the times that I've asked you to do a project or a hand-in or a quiz where you calculated statistics. You know what I'm looking for. And if you don't, look at your assignment sheet. But so if I really wanted to, for example, find the interquartile range, because I'm just too lazy to subtract Q3 minus Q1, there we go. Now I have the interquartile range. It's right there. Okay. So again, you can see why it's a little weird that they don't line these words up with the numbers, but if you just click on them, it shows you which number you want. So please make sure that I don't want anyone to copy and paste this and hand this in as an image on your assignment. You need to take these numbers, someone else calculated them or the technology calculated them, but what you need to do is you need to make them look nice in your presentation, discuss the ones that are interesting, etc., etc. Okay? And again, I would do exactly the same thing for, I did that one for attendance. I could do the same thing for price just by doing that. And then I didn't have to re-add anything. It's all right there. Okay, so that's a really, well, 24-minute overview on how to use Fathom to do statistics. I hope that's helpful. Please ask me if you have any questions or concerns. And good luck with your project. Don't be late. Bye. Oh, oh, wait, no, wait. I have something else. There we go. And now I'm going to say goodbye. All right? Have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Bye.